Hello and welcome back to the Library of Ruina Ranked. In this video, we'll be ranking all the cards from the first row of Urban Nightmare, as well as the Crying Children. This is where we start getting some actually good pages, and we'll be getting right into it with the puppets. Our first page is Automated Movement. This is a 3-cost rolling 2 to 9 evade, 3 to 8 4 to 7 blunt, 3 to 8 evade counter. The evade adds 2 power to the first blunt on Clash Win, and it gives the user 2 haste next scene on use. This page is quite similar to Retaliate. The evade is the same power, but everything else about the page is better. This page will decimate most pages that have 3 dice, especially ones without a defensive odd 1. The main thing holding this page back is that the only utility is an evade counter, which is the worst kind, but that still means this is a fantastic A+ tier page. Mannequin is a 2-cost rolling 4 to 8 block, 3 to 9 evade, 4 to 8 blunt, with the blunt inflicting 1 disarm next scene on hit. This page is fantastic as far as defensive pages go. Great roll range, decent damage, and a decent status effect. Evade on 2 is better than evade on 1 since a lot of pages have block on 1 as well. One note outside of the scope of this list is that it's decent against Red Riding Hooded Mercenary because disarm weakens the wolf's block counter that gives strength on Clash Win. Overall, this makes this page an A-, which is great for a defensive page. Next we have Repressed Flesh. This is a 3-cost rolling 4 to 7 block, 4 to 9 4 to 9 blunt, 3 to 7 blunt counter. It draws a page on use. The first blunt reduces the power of the target's current defensive die by 3, and the second blunt deals 3 stagger damage to the target on hit. This page is pretty bonkers. These are my brother's thoughts on this page.
Repressed Flesh!
Yeah, I pretty much agree. The utility on this page is insane with the page draw, offensive counter, and situational defensive dice housing, and the rolls are also very good. All that combined with triple dice type consistency with the counter means this is an S tier page. Forceful Gesture is a 3-cost rolling 4 to 8 block, 5 to 16 blunt. It draws a page on use, and it inflicts 1 feeble, disarm, and binds next scene on hit. This is the blunt version of cards like Transpierce and Crack of Dawn, and keeping in line with the theme of Puppets pages being disgustingly strong, this is the best one. The block die is slightly stronger than either, and while the offensive die is the weakest of all of them by a bit more than the block, the effects are by far the best. The 3 stats defects are already better than the burn and protection of the bonus damage, but throwing and drawing a page is just nuts. Of course, it still has the weakness of being a 3-cost with 2 dice, but all the effects this page have make it a solid A in my books. Gig is a 1-cost rolling 3 to 6 block, 3 to 6 blunt, and restores 2 light on use. This is top tier light regen for the time. I personally think that utility pages with block dice are better than other utility pages because you can clash with them without feeling too bad because you're absorbing some of the damage, and this one has great rolls as well, only being slightly lower than the generic Plague 2 costs, but this one's a negative 1 cost, so that makes it an S-. Creek is our next page. This 2-cost rolls 5 to 8 3 to 7 blunt, 4 to 6 block. Despite having no utility, Creek makes up for it by having disgustingly high roll range. Typically, pages with 3 dice have a lower roll average than 2 die pages because the power budget is spread out between 3 dice, but this page's 5.5 average roll is higher than pretty much all other 2 costs, and it can often contend with 3 costs, especially since it has dice type consistency. All this means this 0 utility 2 cost gets an S- grade. Our last Puppets page is Puppet Blockade. This is a 0-cost rolling 2 to 7 block, 2 to 4 blunt, and it restores 1 light on use. Compared to Gig, this page loses 1.5 power on the blunt to be easier to cast. The fact that the block die is the same power as Gig makes the ease of casting worth more in my opinion, and this is usually my 4th light regen singleton decks, and because of that, this is another S tier page. Sharp Nails is a 3-cost rolling 4 to 8 block, 5 to 8 blunt, 4 to 9 pierce, 3 to 7 slash counter, and the pierce recovers 5 stagger resist on hit. This page is our Repressed Flesh at home. You get half a power on the block die and 5 stagger resist instead of 3 stagger damage on 3, but you lose out on the dice type consistency, page draw, and defensive dice housing. If this page had dice type consistency, it'd be a bit better, but as it is, it's an A+, which is still quite solid. Circus Knives is our first bad card of the video. This is a 1-cost rolling 3 to 7 blunt, 2 to 6 slash, and the blunt inflicts 2 bleed next scene on hit. There isn't any relevant utility, and the clashing power is quite bad. Considering we saw Gig, which has the same roll average but is 2 light cheaper, this is just a C-. Juggling is a 1-cost single-use range page rolling 6 to 11 blunt and inflicts 1 process next scene on hit. Compared to Headshot, this is 1 light cheaper and inflicts a better stats defect, but it's an entire chapter later, so this is a D. Wildcard is another 1-cost single-use range page. This one rolls 4 to 8 pierce, 3 to 8 blunt, with the pierce recovering 2 HP on hit. This page is a little better than juggling because it has a higher roll average, but it's still pretty bad and is just a D+. Boundary of Death is our next card. This page is a 4 cost, rolling 1 to 4 pierce, but if it naturally max rolls a 4 or higher, it gains 45 power. This is a meme page. If you roll high, you'll feel like a genius, but you're gambling on a 25% chance, and if it misses, it's abysmal. There are ways to increase the chances to about 75%, but that's much later and still not very good, so this unfortunately is just an F. Extreme Edge is a 2 cost, rolling 6 to 12 slash and inflicts 1 disarm next scene on hit. This is a pretty solid 1 die 2 cost page, but those pages aren't great unless you're clashing into ranged pages. The disarm is nice, but I can't give this anything higher than a C. Flashing Strike is a 2 cost, rolling 3 to 7, 3 to 6 slash, 2 to 5 evade. Additionally, if the user's speed is 6 or higher, all the dice gain 2 power. When unempowered, this is very unimpressive, but empowering it makes it roll higher than Creek. Unfortunately, the requirement is very inconsistent unless you build around it, and the pages that give haste are generally not good. In fact, the only one worth using so far is automated movement, and at that point, you may as well just build blunt with Creek as your 2 cost. Overall, the inconsistency of this page means that it's a B. Flying Sword is a 1 cost, rolling 2 to 6, 3 to 7 slash, and on use, the user gains 2 haste next scene. This is supposed to be the Flashing Strike enabler, but its roll range is pretty low. Granted, it does fill its role as an enabler, but as I implied when talking about Flashing Strike, the juice isn't worth the squeeze, and this is the worst of the 2 pages. It gets a C from me. Endless Battle is up next. This is a 2 cost, rolling 4 to 7 block, 3 to 6 blunt, 3 to 7 slash, but if the user's on the brink, the dice gain 1 power. Compared to Faint Memories, this page is stronger unempowered, but weaker empowered. Since you're basically never going to want to use this page unempowered, it's entirely overshadowed by Faint Memories. It also lacks the dice type consistency of Kree, which is a pretty big deal. That means that this is an A in a Brink deck. Desperate Struggle is a 1 cost, rolling 3 to 5, 2 to 5 slash. On the start of Clash, the user takes 5 damage and the dice gain 2 power. Rolling 5 to 7, 4 to 7 is good for a 1 cost, and it does have dice type consistency. Taking 5 damage isn't nothing, but it's not a deal breaker. I honestly dismissed this page first time around, but its rolls are good enough to contend with 2 costs and some 3 costs, so I think that makes this a B-. To Overcome Crisis is a 0 cost, rolling 2 to 7 slash. It draws a page on use, and on hit, if the user is on the brink, they restore 1 light. In a non-brink deck, this is a side grade to Rules of the Backstreets, losing half a power to guarantee the page draw. That's a B- tier page on its own at this point of the game, but the light regen really tips this over the edge. In a brink deck, this is the oil that keeps the machine running, it is an easy S+. 3331973 is a 2 cost single use page, rolling 3 to 8 pierce, 3 to 7 block. It also gives the user persistence for 4 scenes on use. The rolls of this page are pretty bad, and the effects is also pretty worthless. It's a page that'll only help you when you're losing, so I guess it's synergistic because running this page makes you more likely to lose. It's an F. Trash Disposal is a 2 cost, rolling 2 to 7 block, 3 to 8 blunt, 2 to 4 block, 2 to 3 pierce. All the offensive dice recover 2 HP on hit, and the pierce gets recycled every time it rolls a 3 up to 6 times. This page is actually really good if you can get a couple of recycles, and the only reason it doesn't see use is because it's exclusive to the sweeper pages. The damage is good and the recovery is good. The main thing I don't like about this page is that it's a bit inconsistent, but that just means it's an A- instead of higher. Sweep the Backstreets is our next page. This 2 cost rolls 4 to 7 pierce, 2 to 6 block, 3 to 7 slash. The pierce inflicts 2 paralysis next scene on hit, and the slash recovers 3 HP on hit. Compared to Creek, this has a 0.67 lower roll average and no dice type consistency for better dice placement and some utility. The HP is whatever, but 2 paralysis is quite powerful. I would say the status effects make up for the lack of dice type consistency, but the roll average means this is just a B+. For the Family is another 2 cost, rolling 4 to 7 pierce, 3 to 7 evade, 3 to 7 blunt. On combat start, 2 random allies get 1 protection, and the pierce inflicts 2 bleed next scene on hit. Again, comparing this page to Creek gives us a 0.5 lower roll average and no dice type consistency for utility and better dice placement. I'd say this page is a bit worse than Sweep the Backstreet since the sasses are worse and the evade is worse than the block, but the roll range keeps it in B+. Extract Fuel is a 1 cost, rolling 3 to 7 pierce, 2 to 6 block. It restores 2 light on use and recovers 2 HP on hit. This is a side grade to Gigi Gig. Same roll range, worse dice placement, slightly worse defensive die, but has some HP recovery. This is another S-, just like Gigi Gig. Noted in the back streets is a 1 cost rolling 69 blunt for up to 9 pierce. The blunt recovers 3 HP and the pierce recovers 2 HP, but on combat start, all the dice the user plays lose 2 power. This rolls 4 to 7, 3 to 7, which is worse than Desperate Struggle, but since it also affects your other die, this page is pretty much useless. F tier. Blazing Strike is a 4 cost rolling 13 to 28 blunt and inflicts 10 burn on hit, but can only be used at emotion level 3 and above. 10 burn is a pretty crazy amount, and it's very likely to hit, but being a 4 cost with a single die with a play restriction makes it very clunky to use. If you can cast it multiple times you'll be in good shape, but I think the opportunity cost makes this a C-. Our last page is Fierce Charge. This is a 2 cost rolling 7 to 12 slash, inflicting 3 burn on hit. Compared to Extreme Edge, you lose your disarm for half a power and 3 burn. I think that's slightly worse and is another C-. In the next video, we'll be ranking the rest of their pages in Urban Nightmare. I'll see you soon, and as always, thank you for watching.